All right. Good day. So, it's like we need to talk about backing tracks again, but I want to talk about this in a different sense as it like refers to ticket prices versus backing tracks. Now, give me a second to explain. There's an amount of acceptable what we would call, backing tracks like I could give you an example. Aerosmith's Dude Looks Like a Lady. Okay, in the riff, you can clearly hear this trumpets. I have seen Aerosmith a ton live. Those trumpets are still there. Okay, you expect that, now a lot of bands, even though they didn't want to admit it or it came out later, have had like keyboardists and stuff like that on the sideline that are actually playing, the symphonic parts or the melodies of what's going on. Like if all guitars shut off, you would still hear like a subtle melody of the song going on. Um, or the background stuff that it's like on the CD. But when musicians lean into backing tracks too much to where they could just take their hands off the instrument and there's still guitar coming out, that's leaning into it a bit much. Um, that's what people don't care for. Now, Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick says they don't use backing tracks. Now they've always been known for quite the show. He's got these insane guitars that are they're just ridiculous. If ridiculous was a guitar, this guy owns it. Um, like I think it even, beats Steve Vai's new Hydra thing, the two-sided guitar thing, which is pretty neat. But to stay on track here, he talks a little bit now. He's not throwing a whole lot of shade on people that use backing tracks, and he's very understandable of why. Now, it's been this sense of irony with all of this because Gene Simmons himself had started up this conversation, and then come to find out they've been kind of outed on their last tour. It's clearly they are using assist, backing tracks. Now he says, and the thing, for everyone that complains about it, what's the percentage of people that don't complain about it? Nielsen added, I don't really know. So it's a pretty good question. We don't personally do it. So that's my own thoughts. It's no different than having more people on the stage with you. Now, Pearl Jam has added members that really just kind of appeared during their live shows and are now like official members. They realized that they had extra stuff that they had put in their music that they can't reproduce live without having a keyboardist, a piano player, even an organ player, which all those instruments can be just done with a keyed, board, a MIDI board. It there's an acceptable amount of what you expect to hear, the sweeping symphony sounds and the backgrounds and stuff like that. Yes, that's totally acceptable, and especially when there's somebody up on stage with a keyboard playing those parts. These things are completely acceptable, but like Kiss's own, frontman Paul Stanley, has been struggling a bit. He's getting older. He can't hit those high notes. Even bands like Def Leppard, a lot of the bands, they've toned down a step. They tuned down a step, so he's still able to sound. He doesn't have to struggle as hard. Okay, we'll put it that way. And you still get that same groove, that same sound. Those with a finely tuned ear are noticing, hey, wait a minute, they seem to be tuned down and stuff. But the average person isn't noticing these things. They're at a live show. It's a great time. There's a lot of stuff that people just expect. It's I saw Florence and the Machine. She had damn near a full orchestra. She had violin, cello players, all sorts of different instruments that you don't normally see on stage, but her type of music, calls for that. But she could have just as easily had a very simple band that was just keeping, the music going and the rest be, backing tracks. That's not the case with her. There's a lot that's being done on the stage. Now, Gene Simmons is the one that kind of opened up this can of worms himself, which is so ironic that Kiss themselves are being caught. At least Paul Stanley of Kiss was caught, and I'm quite sure there's plenty more that's going on that's assisting them. But he says, I have a problem when you charge $100 to see a live show and the artist uses backing tracks. Simmons says, it's like the ingredients in the food. If the first ingredient on the label is sugar, that's at least honest. It should be on every ticket. You're paying $100. 30 to 50% of the show is on backing tracks, and they'll sing sometimes. Sometimes they'll lip sync. At least be honest. It's not about backing tracks, it's about dishonesty. And he has a valid point. This is a perfectly valid point that, maybe we're getting to a point where we should explain, listen, this may contain an enhanced experience. There's nobody with a synthesizer on our stage. Kind of lies. There's no samples on the drums. There's nothing, Gene continued. There's very few bands who do that now. AC/DC, Metallica, us. I can't even say that about U2 or the Rolling Stones. There's very few bands who don't use backing tracks. Now, again, there's an acceptable level of what you would expect there to be for backing tracks. There are bands that have got into to-dos with Eddie Trunk. Now, if your music has a lot of samples and a lot of that stuff going on, and you got it set up that you're on point timing wise and everything, because those samples are happening on the time that they're happening. When you're playing to a laptop, there's still they're clearly up there playing. It's just they also need to hit the time, and these samples come out and boom, they go into another part of the I have seen independent bands that play with these synthesizer sounds and all these neat different samples and stuff. This is, these things I feel are acceptable. I personally feel that this is just like when I mentioned earlier with there being trumpets where there's clearly no trumpet player on the stage anywhere. And in fact, they would need to be at least 2 or 3 of them to get that sound. They're not going to bring 2 or 3 trumpet players with them just for one song. they're just gonna have somebody either play the trumpets or they're gonna have it cued. It's now this isn't a joke, but I cannot believe that this guy's actually, Doc McGee. It's just it's just such a silly, but yeah, that's their manager's name, Doc McGee. I don't know. If ever a name sounded untrustworthy, I think this is one of, I don't know. But anyway, he defended Paul Stanley's vocals performance on The End of the Road, explaining that the Star Child fully sings to every song at every concert, he explained. It's enhanced. It's just part of the process to make sure that everybody hears the songs the way they should be sang to begin with. Nobody wants to hear people do stuff that's not real. That's not what they came to do here. That's not what they came to hear. Okay, I added it. My bad. That's not what they came to hear, okay? And that's totally understandable. Now look, I personally know artist Scott Schamanblood. He's setting up for shows. He's a one-man band act, but at the same time, he's playing full music up there. Where you go see bands that perform in bars and at pubs and at even restaurants. They're playing live and they're playing their guitar, but there's also melodies and stuff going on. The song, they're doing a Creedence song or whatever. A lot of that song is playing in the background. It's not exactly karaoke, but it's, they probably recorded those parts. So just those parts come along. They have even practiced to what they have recorded to be played. There is a big difference here. But on my end of it, I think that some artists do lean a little too hard into it. My whole thing is, if you take your hands off the instrument, the guitar better stop. There better be, if the drummer puts his hands up in the air, the drums better stop making noise. This is where we have this weird conundrum where the bands seem to understand assist one way and the fans are talking about it another way. Okay? Now, in March 2022, Shinedown guitarist Zach Myers said that 90% of rock artists use at least some pre-recorded tracks during their live performances. He told Rockfeed, "It bothers me that it bothers people." I'm like, why does this bother you? It's the way it is. People have been doing this since the 80s. Now, he's right to a certain extent. And we want the sound to be the best it can be. Could we go up there just for the four of us and put on the best rock show ever? Of course. But that's not how we want to do it. Now, I get that. They want it to sound like when you hear Shinedown on album, there's a lot of background stuff going on that, violins or cellos and symphony parts and stuff. That's the backing stuff that we expect. But we don't expect it to be karaoke. That really, it's 90% of it isn't real and 10% of it is you just being there on stage. Even if you pre-recorded the parts and they are fully you, it's got a karaoke feel to it. It's different when it's an independent band or it's a solo artist. So we obviously we accept these things. Like There is one of the greatest singers in the world, Dimash. You know, he sings to, a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in the background, and there's only a piano player on stage with him, but there's a full symphony or stuff going on in the background. And at times there is no symphony there. There's times where he's played with a full band, but it doesn't mean that his performance is any less. It's, we expect a certain amount of stuff because it's got to be there in order for it to sound the way that they expect it to sound, the way that they expect you to expect it to sound. I totally understand that. Former singer Sebastian Bach, Skid Row, has previously said that he is one of the last people. Of course, he's got to make himself sound, he's got delusions of grandeur anyway. Who are still not using pre-recorded tracks on their live shows. I don't know how much longer I can say to you that I don't use tapes on stage, because I don't, and I never have. He told Consequence of Sound, and I still don't. Which one of my first react/review videos was of him sounding like shit on stage. Now, I still would rather that, because that's him. I want to hear him raw. I want to hear that he's really pushing it out, and maybe he's not sounding his best, but he's doing it. And it's and I still don't. When I have an opening bands and they're using tapes, and then I come out and I don't use tapes, sometimes it makes me feel stupid, because I'm like, what am I doing when all these kids half my age can come on stage and do all of my moves, but they don't have to warm up for an hour before the show or weeks before the first show? He's got a valid point there. It's like they're getting assisted too much. It's, it doesn't matter if their voice cracks, because they're singing to it perfect. They're singing to themselves that's singing it perfectly. That's had the opportunity to record it so it sounds perfect. And take, every line of a song is different takes of a song all the time. When you record, that's how they get the perfect, they pick all the lines that make up the perfect verse, and boom, there you go. Yeah, there's a lot of times where things are done all in one take and stuff like that. But, by and large, but that's the thing though. People aren't always expecting perfection. And I think, that's, at the same time, kind of what, he's not really saying, but, it's like, I understand his frustration. Sometimes I'm like, why do I even bother? If the public is so used to this other way, it's becoming very rare to come see good bands that actually, that's actually a real band. That's not miming or doing silly moves while a tape is running. It's funny, they still use the term tape. There's no tapes involved. There's no reel-to-reels backstage or tape players with a tape in it. It kind of shows the age, though. It's all digital. It's all coming from a computer. It just becomes more rare as the years go on. In 2019, Iron Maiden guitarist Adrian Smith said he doesn't agree with certain rock artists relying on pre-recorded tracks during their live performances. I tell you what, I see it with a lot of younger bands, and I don't think it's a good thing at all. See, I grew up in the era of the band was playing 99% of what you were hearing. Screw up in alls. I've heard, songs being perfect, but the singer lose their spot for a second or go into the wrong verse and be like, oh shit, that's great. That's awesome. a robot. Sweet. You're a human being and you're making a mistake, and it's an experience for the audience to be, they were there the night that, so and so, screwed up their lives, but they went back into it, made a joke about it. It was great. It was a fun time, That makes it a special experience, not the same. It's like everything doesn't have to be perfect. And, yeah, they want it to be as, good as it can be, but, he's telling the New York Post, I mean, the music is getting too technical now. You have computerized recording systems, which we use, but I think we use them more for convenience than because we need to. We've toured with a couple of bands that use tapes. It's not real. You're supposed to play live. It should be live. I don't agree with using tapes. I think it's a real shame. Now, here we go. You knew they were coming up in this article. One musician who was open about his band's use of tapes, vocals during live performances, is Motley Crue bassist Nikki Sixx, who said, "We've used technology since 1987. Clever wording you got there, Nikki. He added, the group employed sequencers, subtones, background vocals, tracks plus background singers, and us. Some of those things are acceptable, but you guys lean into them too much, to the point that your own bandmate is like, I'm all set. We're just up here. I can take my hands off the guitar at any time and just stand here like this. Motley Crue also taped stuff. We can't tour with like cello parts and ballads, etc. Duh. We know that. That's the stuff we expect to hear. We don't expect to hear your bass when you take the hands off of it. Get the difference? Okay. We love it and we don't hide it. It's a great tool to fill out the sound. Yeah, I think you're filling out your sound a bit much there, bub. In 2014 interview, Motley Crue guitarist Mick Mars admitted that he wasn't comfortable with the fact of his band's use pre-recorded backing vocals in its live shows, claiming that he preferred to watch groups whose performances are delivered entirely live. I don't like it, he said. I think a band like ours, I have to say, 60s bands were my favorite, 60s and 70s bands, because they were real, like 3-piece bands or 4-piece bands, and they just got up. They kicked it up. Made a mistake, so what? And that's... I have seen Aerosmith so many times. I have seen some pretty nuts stuff at an Aerosmith show from the band itself. I have, it's a whole nother story for another time, but, that's a perfect example of a band that was always, they were playing live. You heard them screw up when they screwed up. They were a band that was used to playing their music because they played it over and over and over again. That's why it sounded so perfect, because they were so good. There's a lot of bands like that. And even Motley Crue, but because they're real 3-piece, 4-piece bands, they kicked it up. Made mistakes, so what? Sounded a little bit empty here or there, so what? It's the bigness, the rawness, the people that developed and wrote the songs and made them and presented them to me. That's what I really like. I mean, I could put on a Motley Crue CD and play that all day long. I don't want to do that. And that's just it. When people go see a band live, they're looking for the live experience. They don't mind. You know how many times like Pearl Jam has just totally reworked a song that they played for? Tool has done that with songs. Their famously Push It, their song Push It. I saw them personally totally rework that song, and then it ended up on this Salival CD. Um, it made it this whole new experience, and it was beautiful. You know, um, it made it so much. It had so much more heart, so much more rawness to it. It was something that I had never heard before. It was like hearing the same song, but for the first time all over again. And that's what people want when they go to a show, I think. I think by and large, people are expecting to see a live show. I think maybe some of the newer generation with pop acts and stuff like that, they can get away with more because it's dependent on more just synthesized music and dance music and stuff like that. Um, you know, if Taylor Swift is up there singing, she's singing. The backing stuff, is inconsequent. It doesn't, that's secondary to as long as when she takes her mouth away from the mic, her voice isn't still coming through 100%. And I know, and I've seen her live. I know she sounds, like a person singing their songs, or like when you hear a singer that's running, struggling to sing and run at the same time, because they're really singing. And that's what people want. They pay. If people are gonna pay this much for an experience, if you're gonna charge all these amounts of money for this experience, have it be an experience that only can happen from the band being raw, being themselves. I mean, trim down all that backing stuff that you're using. The guitars shouldn't have to have another guitar of themselves playing in the background to thicken it up. Thicken it up, put some more contour, drop a little bass in there a little bit more. That'll thicken it up. I mean, I hear a lot of these excuses from bands, and and I think also the line gets blurred on, they try to mix or conflate two different things. And, isn't that the way with a lot of things? It's almost like they're trying to be politicians about backing tracks. It's like, we understand that there's an acceptable amount, but when you lean into it to the point that you can just take your hands off your instrument and it's still playing, that's not just bad. No. Let me know what you think. I'm curious. There's a lot of killer shows coming up. There's the Aerosmith tour coming up. There's, Nightwish, who they've had some cancellations and stuff, but I believe they had a few more shows left. There is a bunch of bands that are going to be coming. There's new albums coming out. Deicide's coming out with a new album. It's just, there's a lot of cool tours and a lot of cool shows coming up, and I bet a lot of them bands ain't going to be using assist. If you need assistance, they have walkers down at the hospice that I hope everybody out there is having a great day. I hope it's going as good as it can be. We got tons more stuff to talk about, all sorts of reviews, reacts, all sorts of awesome stuff. Let me know what you're thinking about this. I am curious because I know that there's a lot of people going to a lot of shows. What is your level of acceptance for backing or assist? I know there's a lot of bands that are putting out live DVDs. We got Love Bites. There's a bunch of bands. Love Bites, I just did one on. Go check that video out. Awesome stuff. They're coming out with a whole big live DVD. I know bands after the fact can go up and clean some mistakes up because we have the technology. We can do these things. But at the same time, there are bands like Love Bites that are just extremely, awesome live. They're just a great live band. But what do you think? What is your acceptance level? Do you think they should label the tickets if it's to a certain extent? Um, you know, uh, should we be having this conversation? I mean, what do you think? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and like, comment, subscribe, and all this good stuff. We will see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.